It was a call that would echo through the streets of Raleigh for years to come. The voice on the other end of the 911 line was chilling in its detachment, almost too calm for someone who had just confessed to something unspeakable. "I think I killed my wife," Matthew Phelps said, his words lingering in the air. "I don't know what happened. I just snapped." The simplicity of his confession was as horrifying as the crime itself. In those few sentences, he admitted to a brutal act of violence that would forever haunt not only him, but everyone who had once known him, and Lauren Hugelmaier, his wife, the woman who had once trusted him with her life. Lauren's death stunned the community. She was young, full of potential, someone who had worked hard to build a future. Her life, which should have been filled with the hopes and dreams she had cherished, was brutally cut short in a moment of madness. But the questions lingered. How had it come to this? How had Lauren, a woman so devoted to her faith, her family, and her career, ended up as a victim of the very person she loved? It wasn't just a case of domestic violence. It was a betrayal so deep, so incomprehensible, that it left those who knew her in complete shock. The murder of Lauren Hugelmaier didn't just devastate Raleigh. It ignited a painful national conversation. Statistics from the National Domestic Violence Hotline reveal that nearly 1 in 4 women will experience severe violence in their lifetime. But intimate partner violence remains one of the most underreported crimes in America. It's often easy to overlook the signs, to dismiss a problem until it's too late. But Lauren's death forced people to confront the reality of domestic abuse in their own lives, a reality that many had chosen to ignore until it touched someone they loved. Lauren's life, like so many others, didn't end in a burst of violence. It unraveled slowly, imperceptibly, as cracks began to form in her seemingly perfect world. Her marriage to Matthew, which had begun years earlier, in middle school, and was rekindled through social media, appeared ideal. Their Star Wars-themed wedding, the shared love of everything nerdy, the promise of forever, it all seemed too perfect. But behind that perfect facade, something darker was taking shape, a storm quietly brewing beneath the surface. Raleigh, North Carolina, 2017. An ordinary place, an ordinary time, where most people would never expect something so horrific to occur. And yet, for Lauren, it became the backdrop for a tragic and heart-wrenching end to her young life. As the investigation into her death unfolded, it would reveal a truth far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined, uncovering the true nature of the man she had married, and uncovering a tale of deception, control, and manipulation that no one could have predicted. Lauren Hugelmaier grew up in a tight-knit family in Raleigh, North Carolina, where love and values ran deep. As the youngest of 3 siblings, she always felt a strong sense of responsibility to her family. Her father, a local businessman, taught her the importance of perseverance and hard work, while her mother, a teacher, instilled in her kindness and compassion. Their home was filled with routine and tradition. Sunday mornings meant church, family dinners were sacred, and love was the foundation of everything they did. Lauren was especially close to her mother. Their bond was unshakable, and her mother's guidance shaped much of the woman Lauren became. Determined, hardworking, and caring. She worked tirelessly to earn her degree in business and was on her way to building a successful career. But even as she pursued her professional goals, her faith was her anchor, offering her strength when life became difficult. She wasn't one to boast or seek attention, but her quiet confidence drew people to her. Whether it was her kindness or her ability to genuinely care for others, Lauren made a lasting impression on everyone she met. However, her life would take a turn she could never have anticipated when she crossed paths with Matthew Phelps. Matthew's childhood had been far different from Lauren's. Raised in a broken home, he was no stranger to instability. His parents' tumultuous marriage ended in divorce when he was a teenager, leaving him with feelings of abandonment and insecurity. While he briefly lived with his grandparents, his relationship with his parents remained distant and strained. His father, a man of few words, was emotionally unavailable, and his mother's erratic behavior only added to the confusion. The sense of trust and attachment that Lauren had been raised with was something Matthew struggled to grasp. In high school, Matthew was a misfit. He had difficulty forming lasting friendships, often spiraling into emotional outbursts when things didn't go his way. His charm could draw people in, but his true self remained hidden behind a mask. Matthew's first marriage to Brooke Truitt ended in divorce after only a few years, another sign of the deep cracks in his psyche. Even though Matthew worked hard to put on a facade of normalcy, his emotional turmoil was always lurking just below the surface. He could switch from being charming and charismatic to distant and unpredictable in the blink of an eye. It wasn't until he met Lauren that the extent of his inner struggles began to show. But by then, Lauren was already in love. Their connection started innocently enough. They had known each other in middle school, but lost touch after graduation. Years later, they reconnected through Instagram. It didn't take long for them to realize they had a lot in common. Both were big fans of Harry Potter, Star Wars, and other nerdy pop culture staples. These shared interests became the foundation for their growing bond. But what really drew them together was their shared faith. Both had grown up in religious households, and that common ground provided a sense of peace and connection neither of them had felt in a while. As they began dating, the excitement of a new relationship was evident. Endless conversations, dates, and the thrill of learning more about each other. For Matthew, Lauren represented a sense of stability, something he had never known growing up. Her love and understanding gave him hope that he could heal from his painful past. For Lauren, Matthew seemed like someone with great potential. His vulnerability made him more human in her eyes, and she believed that her love could help him overcome his demons. But like so many people caught in toxic relationships, Lauren's optimism would soon clash with reality. Small cracks began to show in their relationship almost immediately. Her friends and family, who knew her well, were cautious about Matthew. And though his past wasn't fully known at the time, it raised red flags. But Lauren, ever hopeful and trusting, dismissed these concerns. She believed that love could overcome anything. She couldn't have known then how much her life would change in the years to come, or how deep those cracks would become. Lauren Hugelmaier and Matthew Phelps's wedding in November 2016 was a dream come true. At least, that's how it appeared on the surface. Surrounded by family and friends, they exchanged vows under a canopy of soft, twinkling fairy lights. The venue was a reflection of their shared love for all things whimsical, especially Star Wars. The ceremony had personal touches, from lightsaber-themed wedding favors to a Star Wars cake topper. To everyone watching, it looked like the perfect celebration of love, a fairy tale wedding that would lead to a perfect life together. But beneath the surface, cracks in their relationship were already starting to show. For Lauren, that day marked the beginning of what she had always hoped for, a marriage filled with love, faith, and a future of shared dreams. She had always imagined a life with a devoted husband, a family, and a fulfilling career. When she met Matthew, she thought she had found someone who shared those same values. Despite his troubled past, he presented himself as the perfect partner, promising stability and love. Her family was excited for them, convinced that the couple's love for each other would carry them through any obstacle. But not everyone was convinced. Matthew's mother, a constant source of tension in his life, had a disruptive presence at the wedding. Her behavior was off-putting, distant, cold, and subtly critical of Lauren, in ways that went unnoticed by most guests, but left Lauren feeling uncomfortable. It wasn't just that she disapproved of Lauren's place in Matthew's life. It was the way she seemed determined to undermine their relationship. While Matthew shrugged it off, as a result of his mother's complicated past, Lauren couldn't ignore the strain it added to their already fragile beginning. In the early days of their marriage, there was a sense of optimism. They settled into a modest apartment in Raleigh, North Carolina, with hopes for the future. Lauren worked multiple jobs, balancing her career ambitions with her duties as a supportive wife. Matthew, on the other hand, struggled to find his footing professionally. His history of job instability weighed heavily on them, but Lauren believed in him. She encouraged him to pursue his passions, offering her unwavering support, hoping they could overcome the challenges together. Yet, despite their best efforts, the strain of life's hurdles began to wear on them. From the outside, it appeared like an ordinary marriage, with its ups and downs. They had weekly game nights with family, small traditions that made their apartment feel like home. But behind closed doors, tensions were building. Lauren began noticing subtle changes in Matthew. His emotional distance grew more apparent. He withdrew from her, spending more time alone and less time with her or their families. The cracks in their relationship were no longer just emotional. They were becoming tangible. As their financial situation worsened, Lauren felt the weight of their mounting debt pressing on them. Every time she tried to bring it up, Matthew became defensive, shutting her out. It wasn't just money that caused friction. It was the growing emotional distance between them. Lauren tried to push her concerns aside, telling herself that every marriage has its struggles, but a sense of unease began to take root. When she discovered that Matthew had been hiding significant parts of his past, namely, his first marriage to Brooke Truitt, it shattered her trust in him. The man she thought she knew, the man she had married, had kept such an important secret from her. If he could hide something so significant, what else was he concealing? This discovery, coupled with other warning signs, only deepened Lauren's doubts. Matthew's commitment to their shared faith began to slip away. He stopped attending church with her, and his once strong religious convictions seemed to fade. His behavior began to mirror the emotional detachment that had characterized his parents' relationship, and Lauren couldn't help but fear that their marriage was heading down the same destructive path. What had once felt like a love story full of promise was now becoming a painful reality. The foundation of their relationship once so solid in her eyes, had begun to crumble. With financial strain, hidden secrets, and growing emotional distance, Lauren couldn't ignore the fact that their marriage was far from the dream she had once imagined. What was supposed to be her happily ever after was turning into a nightmare, one she couldn't escape. The problems in Lauren and Matthew's marriage didn't stay hidden for long. As the months passed, the small cracks in their relationship widened, and the dreams they once shared became distant memories. What had started as a life filled with hope and optimism unraveled piece by piece, as financial stress, emotional distance, and eroding trust seeped into every corner of their lives. One of the first signs of trouble was Matthew's financial irresponsibility. What began as a few careless purchases soon spiraled out of control. The $10,000 they had saved for their future disappeared quickly, swallowed by Matthew's obsession with video games, gadgets, and momentary pleasures. Meanwhile, Lauren worked multiple jobs to keep their household afloat, feeling the growing disparity between their efforts. While she worked long hours, Matthew retreated into his video games, seemingly oblivious to their mounting debt and unpaid bills. Every time she tried to address the issue, he brushed her off, promising that things would improve. But they didn't. They only got worse. As the months went on, Lauren's frustration turned into resentment. She felt like she was carrying the weight of their marriage alone, her hopes for a partnership fading with each passing day. She had always believed they could overcome any challenge together. But Matthew's refusal to take responsibility made her question that belief. The difference between her tireless work ethic and his lack of motivation created a toxic dynamic, eating away at her trust and patience. The emotional distance between them grew even more apparent. Matthew withdrew from family activities and social events, avoiding opportunities to connect with Lauren or her loved ones. Weekly game nights, once a cherished tradition, became a thing of the past. Matthew's absence from their life together became glaring, and it was as though he was becoming a ghost in their shared home. One day, while sorting through old boxes, Lauren stumbled upon a photo album filled with pictures from Matthew's first marriage, something he had never mentioned. His first wife, Brooke, was a complete mystery to her. When Lauren confronted him, Matthew grew defensive and evasive, brushing it off as unimportant. But Lauren couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. This discovery shattered what little trust remained in their marriage, turning every conversation into an interrogation. Lauren began questioning everything. Was the man she had married ever the person she thought he was? Or had he always been someone else, hiding behind a carefully crafted facade? Despite the growing cracks in their relationship, Lauren tried to maintain hope. She told herself love could overcome these challenges, but it was becoming harder to believe. Matthew's behavior grew more erratic. He began keeping secrets, locking his phone, staying up late, and deleting his browsing history. Lauren discovered he had even created a secret Instagram account where he interacted with strangers and commented on disturbing content. At night, Lauren lay awake, her heart racing with fear. The man she had married now felt like a stranger, someone she couldn't trust or connect with. The emotional walls between them were so high, the distance so vast, that she felt herself slipping away from him, even as she desperately tried to hold on. Lauren's fear turned to dread, when she discovered Matthew had been researching coricidin, a powerful cold medicine that can cause hallucinations when abused. Realizing that Matthew had been experimenting with dangerous substances horrified her. Was he trying to escape reality, or was something darker at play? When she confronted him, Matthew became hostile and indifferent, brushing off her concerns with cold detachment. The man she had once known was gone, replaced by someone she no longer recognized, and someone she was beginning to fear. But it wasn't just the drugs or the secrets that frightened Lauren. It was the growing sense that Matthew was unraveling in ways she couldn't understand. His behavior became more unpredictable. Some days he barely spoke. Other days he exploded in anger over trivial things. Lauren began to wonder if she was living with someone capable of anything. Despite all the warning signs, Lauren clung to the hope that their marriage could be saved. But by the time she realized how far things had gone, it was too late. The man she had married was gone, and the life they had built together was beyond repair. What had once seemed like the perfect love story had turned into a nightmare she couldn't escape. By the summer of 2017, the tension between Lauren and Matthew had reached a breaking point. What was once a relationship filled with hope was now hanging by a thread. Every day felt like a struggle, and Lauren's concerns shifted from financial stress and Matthew's unpredictable behavior to a deeper, more terrifying fear. The man she had once loved seemed like a stranger, and she no longer recognized the person who stood before her. Every moment felt like the calm before a storm, and Lauren didn't know how much longer she could maintain the facade of normalcy. In a last-ditch effort to salvage their crumbling connection, Lauren and Matthew decided to take a trip to Kentucky. They hoped it might help them reconnect, but from the moment they arrived, something felt wrong. The family photo shoot they had planned to capture happy memories quickly turned awkward. Matthew, who had once been eager to share such moments with Lauren, seemed distant, his mind elsewhere, his eyes avoiding hers. The gap between them had grown so wide that it was almost tangible. Returning to Raleigh only intensified the strain. Matthew's behavior became more erratic, lashing out at Lauren over trivial matters and retreating further into his own world. He spent more time alone, whether it was in the couch or his bedroom. Lauren couldn't ignore the fact that the man she had married was slipping away, and she was powerless to stop it. Every attempt to reach him, to understand what was wrong, was met with cold indifference or anger. Then, on the morning of August 31st, 2017, everything changed. Lauren's co-worker was scheduled to visit their home. As she prepared for the visit, she noticed Matthew was unusually distant. He seemed withdrawn, almost like he was trying to disappear into the walls. He left the house early, saying he had something to do, but Lauren couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Hours passed with no word from him. Lauren tried to reach him, calls, texts, but each attempt was met with silence. Her anxiety grew with every unanswered message. She called her sister, seeking comfort, but her sister's reassuring words didn't ease the fear building inside her. Something was wrong. She couldn't explain it, but she knew. As the day wore on, Lauren realized the silence between them was deafening. Her calls went unanswered, her texts ignored. The knot in her stomach tightened. Little did she know, the day's events would mark the last time she would ever hear from her husband. The final chilling communication she would have with him was a desperate call for help, a call that came too late. The tragic events of August 31st, 2017, began in a way that felt ordinary, but would soon shatter the lives of everyone involved. Lauren had no idea that this would be the last day she would ever see. The evening started like any other. She had been trying to reach Matthew, but his silence had become another sign of the growing distance between them. Alone in their home, an unsettling feeling had been building for days. Then Matthew walked in, his presence chilling, and his demeanor colder than she had ever seen. What happened next was quick and brutal. Investigators later described how Matthew returned home, seemingly calm, but something inside him had snapped. The man Lauren had known, the man she had once loved, was gone. In his place stood someone capable of unfathomable violence. The attack was sudden and relentless. Lauren fought back, her defensive wounds showing she didn't go down without a fight. The method was horrifying in its simplicity. Matthew used a kitchen knife, but the violence with which he wielded it left no chance for survival. Lauren's final moments were marked by desperation as she fought for her life against the overwhelming force of her husband's rage. There was no escape. Blood soaked the floor, marking the end of a life once filled with hope. Her attempts to flee were in vain. She had no chance against his rage. Afterward, Matthew's behavior was disturbingly detached. When he called 911, his voice lacked the urgency one would expect in such a horrifying situation. He claimed Lauren had simply fallen asleep, but as the dispatcher pressed him, his story fell apart. His inability to explain why Lauren was lying lifeless, surrounded by blood, only deepened the suspicion surrounding him. His answers were fragmented, as if he was trying to convince himself that what he had done wasn't real. When first responders arrived, they found Lauren's body, blood-soaked, lying in the living room. The scene was chaotic. Furniture overturned, blood spattered across the floor. And it was clear this wasn't a random act of violence. Matthew's strange calmness, in stark contrast to the scene, immediately drew the attention of investigators. He barely reacted to the sight of his wife's body, offering vague and incoherent explanations. His detachment felt wrong, as if he wasn't seeing the same horrifying reality as everyone else. Investigators quickly realized his behavior didn't match the situation. There were no signs of a break-in, no external threat. This violence had come from within, from the breakdown of the relationship between two people who should have been closest to each other. Matthew's actions, both during the 911 call and afterward, raised immediate red flags. His calm demeanor and inconsistent story made investigators question everything he said. He claimed Lauren had just fallen asleep, but the blood-soaked scene told a different story. His lies were too numerous to ignore, and his attempts to maintain an innocent facade only deepened the suspicion surrounding him. As the investigation unfolded, authorities focused on Matthew. Piece by piece, they uncovered the truth about what had really happened that night. The carefully crafted image of a devoted husband and loving partner began to unravel. What they discovered would send shockwaves through the community, revealing the dark reality of Lauren's marriage and the terrifying man she had been living with. Once the first responders secured the crime scene and gathered initial evidence, the true weight of the investigation began to unfold. What had initially seemed like a tragic domestic dispute quickly revealed darker, more disturbing layers. The detectives realized that Lauren's death wasn't just a moment of violence. It was part of something much deeper and more sinister. The crime scene itself was chilling. Every detail was carefully analyzed. Bloodstains were concentrated in specific areas, and the blood spatter patterns told a haunting story. It was clear that Lauren had fought back. Her defensive wounds on her arms and hands painted a desperate picture of a woman trying to survive. The brutal nature of the attack and the fact that it seemed to unfold in stages suggested she had tried to escape, only to be overtaken by Matthew's overwhelming rage. The investigators focused on the weapon used to kill Lauren, a knife from the couple's own kitchen. The familiarity of the weapon was haunting. A mundane household item had become a grim symbol of the deeply personal nature of the attack. This was not a random act of violence. It came from someone Lauren knew, someone who should have protected her. As the physical evidence was processed, the detectives expanded their search into the digital world. They uncovered a hidden side of Matthew's life that painted a far darker picture than anyone had realized. His social media, once filled with happy photos of the couple, now told a different story. The facade he had carefully crafted began to crack. Journals and online activity revealed unsettling truths about Matthew's mindset. His personal writings expressed growing dissatisfaction with Lauren, as well as disturbing fantasies and violent thoughts. It became clear that Matthew had been harboring anger and resentment for some time. His behavior in the days leading up to the murder had been erratic, and now the evidence suggested that this darkness had been festering for months. The investigation dug deeper into Matthew's digital life. His phone, email, and social media accounts held even more troubling clues. A secret Instagram account he used was filled with disturbing posts, revealing an obsession with control, dominance, and violence. He followed accounts that glorified manipulation and abuse, showing a side of him far removed from the quiet, reserved figure he had presented to the world. Perhaps the most chilling discovery was Matthew's research into dangerous substances, specifically coricidin, a cough syrup that can be lethal when abused. His search history revealed multiple visits to forums discussing the drug's effects and its potential use for escaping reality. This, combined with his journal entries, painted an even clearer picture. Matthew had been spiraling toward violence for months. Piece by piece, the investigators uncovered the truth about Matthew Phelps, the quiet, unassuming man who had once seemed like a reliable partner was living a lie. Behind the facade was a man with a dark, violent streak. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that Lauren had been trapped in a toxic marriage. What started as a promising life together had slowly twisted into a nightmare, one that Lauren had never fully understood until it was too late. As the investigation into Lauren's murder unfolded, the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, each more chilling than the last. What had initially appeared to be a tragic act of violence was now revealing itself as something far more deliberate and sinister. The evidence, from forensic findings to digital footprints, painted a clear picture of a man who had carefully planned his actions. Matthew Phelps, once seen as the loving husband, was unmasked as someone hiding a dark and disturbed nature beneath the surface. One of the most significant revelations came from the toxicology report. It confirmed the investigators' suspicions. Lauren had been drugged before the attack. The presence of coricidin, a substance Matthew had spent hours researching, in her system was no accident. It was a calculated move to incapacitate her and make her vulnerable. This was not a crime of passion or rage, but a cold, premeditated act. Further examination of the crime scene and autopsy findings added to the unsettling nature of the attack. Lauren had suffered multiple stab wounds, but the later stages of the assault showed no signs of struggle. Her initial defensive wounds suggested she fought back, but she had quickly been overpowered. The absence of defensive wounds in the final moments made it clear that Lauren had been ambushed in a weakened state. This was a brutal, calculated attack, orchestrated by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Matthew's journals, eventually uncovered and analyzed by forensic psychologists, revealed the disturbing depths of his inner turmoil. His writings were filled with obsessive thoughts about control and escape. He resented Lauren's strength, her independence, and her ability to stand firm in their deteriorating marriage. Over and over, he fantasized about starting over, escaping the life he felt trapped in. His journals became a window into the mind of a man who had convinced himself that violence was the only way to free himself from his own frustration. Matthew's hidden online presence also played a critical role in the investigation. His social media activity, kept secret from his friends and family, painted a much darker picture of him. He posted disturbing content, anti-Christian imagery, references to violent films like American Psycho, and expressions of anger that had never been shared with anyone in his life. His online identity revealed a man whose violent fantasies were no longer confined to his thoughts, but were slowly creeping into his real life. Perhaps the most unsettling discovery came from Matthew's financial records. Investigators uncovered the full extent of his mounting debt caused by his compulsive spending, gambling, and addiction to video games. It became clear that Matthew saw Lauren as an obstacle to his financial freedom. He had taken out a life insurance policy on her just before her death, with a significant payout that would benefit him. The motive for murder was no longer just rooted in anger and dissatisfaction, but in financial gain. The persona Matthew had carefully constructed, a mild-mannered religious man, was a mask concealing the darkness within. He had presented himself as the loving husband, the devoted partner, but in reality, he had been living a double life. The deeper the investigators dug into his past, the more they uncovered his lies, manipulation, and violent tendencies. This wasn't just a story of betrayal. It was the story of a man who had meticulously planned his wife's murder for his own benefit. As the investigation came to a close, the devastating truth set in. Lauren had been living in fear, though she hadn't recognized it for what it was. In her efforts to save her marriage, she had missed the signs, the mounting resentment, the growing distance, and the troubling behavior that pointed to the danger she was in. Her love for Matthew had blinded her to the truth. He had been slowly, methodically, and violently plotting her death. The arrest of Matthew Phelps marked the beginning of a painful journey for the Hugelmaier family and the broader community. As the details of Lauren's tragic death unfolded, shock and disbelief spread throughout Raleigh. How could someone who had seemed so harmless, a member of their church community, be capable of such brutality? The tragedy sent ripples through everyone who knew the couple, leaving a deep sense of sorrow and confusion. The legal proceedings began swiftly, and Matthew was charged with first-degree murder. The case quickly attracted national attention, with overwhelming evidence stacking up against him. His journals, digital activity, toxicology reports, and financial motives all pointed to one chilling truth. Matthew had premeditated the murder of his wife. The prosecution presented a compelling case, revealing Matthew not only as a man filled with anger, but also one driven by financial desperation and deep resentment. The crime had been meticulously planned. In an unexpected twist, Matthew chose to enter a plea agreement, admitting his guilt in exchange for a reduced sentence. He clearly recognized the strength of the evidence against him. In court, Lauren's family spoke with heartbreaking grief. Her relatives, devastated by the loss, tearfully described Lauren's kindness, her hard-working nature, and her love for her family. They spoke of the future she had been denied, and the pain of their words was nearly unbearable. No amount of legal proceedings could bring Lauren back. Her life had been stolen. Matthew's final statement was brief and chilling. He showed no real remorse for the murder. His words, acknowledging the pain he had caused, felt hollow and detached. There was no apology, no explanation for the horrors he had inflicted. His cold demeanor contrasted sharply with the raw emotion of Lauren's family, a reminder of the depth of the betrayal. Matthew's deception had spread far beyond their home, affecting all who had trusted him. Though Matthew's legal battle came to a close, the impact of Lauren's death would haunt those closest to her for years. Her family, especially her parents, struggled with the devastating truth about her marriage. They had always believed Lauren was in a loving relationship, rooted in shared values and faith. The shocking revelation that she had been trapped in an abusive marriage shattered their understanding of her life. The pain of not seeing the warning signs, of not being able to protect her, weighed heavily on them. The community was left reeling. The church, where Lauren and Matthew had once been active members, faced the unthinkable truth. One of their own had committed such a horrific crime. Many in the congregation had seen the couple as the picture of a happy Christian marriage, and reconciling that image with the violent reality was a painful and confusing task. From the ashes of this tragedy came a glimmer of hope. Lauren's family became vocal advocates for domestic violence awareness. They worked tirelessly to educate others on the signs of emotional and financial manipulation, the importance of support systems, and the dangers of ignoring red flags in relationships. They wanted Lauren's death to be a catalyst for change, urging others to trust their instincts and seek help when needed. Matthew Phelps's life sentence brought a small measure of justice, but it could never undo the damage he had caused. The impact of Lauren's death lingered long after the trial. The community, forever changed, came together to honor her memory. Though her story was tragic, it became a symbol of strength for those silenced by abuse. It served as a reminder of the critical need for vigilance, support, and advocacy to prevent such tragedies from happening again.